All good.
Good afternoon, everyone. You are very welcome to this afternoon session with Laura Wagner-Meyer, the second meeting with her. And now we are going to talk more about migrants and refugees in the context of communicating with the younger generation through social media. Laura Wagner-Meyer.
Thank you. Great. Okay. We are ready for round 2. So yesterday's session flew by completely, but what was nice is that we were able to establish what social media is specifically, and we all got an understanding of who Gen Z is and why they're so monumental as a demographic. So looking in this context, we're now looking at them beyond just social media. We're now looking at their impact on social change, such as migrants and refugees. Ooh. Sorry, I think this need to connect the screen. As they're getting that up, but just to recap, so Scene TV specifically has around 7 million subscribers. 70% of our audience is Gen Z, so we really have a great understanding of how to get them to connect to these kinds of issues, especially social issues. And looking at the context of migrants and refugees, social media is so important for them. For example, it helps with effective communication. That is with themselves, with their communities, with their families, with the life that they've left behind. And it just helps them connect as they go through the journeys that they're experiencing. Social connectedness. That's probably one of the most important. It helps them really integrate into the new communities that they're entering. So social media really aids in that sense of connectedness where they feel a bit more connected into a brand new environment. Participation in learning opportunities. Social media has a way of educating people in such a distinct way, and it gives them access to opportunities that they might not have had before. And access to information in general. Imagine moving over to a new place and not knowing anything about it until you get there. And social media really helps them to connect and find their way around. And lastly, I think this is the most important, the expression of self. These individuals go through so much, all of these trials and tribulations, and having an outlet to connect with one another who've experienced the same things really does help that whole sense of self-expression as they're navigating this new world. So current views in the media, they're quite negative, unfortunately. You can see all of these headlines are quite sensationalists. They're dangerous, if anything. They describe migrants as being kill Brit truckers. They're using really heavy language, invasion. And there's just this perception that is based off of bias and ill-founded information that really bleeds into society and forms this thinking of negativity towards refugees specifically. Traditional media, unfortunately, has contributed to that way of thinking where there's a distrust of refugees and migrants. There's a lack of understanding because of such dangerous narratives. So yesterday we touched on Gen Z and why we're such a powerful, powerful demographic, and we are really passionate about social change. This is one of the recent issues of, I can't remember which magazine, but it's a recent image where they wanted to re-transform what a refugee looks like. And this is very different to the previous headlines that you saw. And we just really want to use social media as a way to connect, be a bit more creative about how we're communicating, and a bit more creative as to how we get our social change across into the broader stream. So we all know that social media has an incredible impact. Who of you, just by show of hands, have seen this image of baby Alan? Incredible. So for those of you who haven't seen it or aren't aware of it, Alan and his family had been escaping Syria, and they landed on the Grecian coast, and unfortunately their boats capsized. But this image specifically, once shared far and wide in 2015, it brought global attention to the refugee crisis, especially in Europe. Syrian refugees were not considered. These were things that they had been experiencing for many, many years. But one photograph had global impact. It really connected with people and drove empathy and change. Charities all around the world were receiving donations. There was a lot more understanding and empathy towards refugees and migrants during this time. And that is how powerful social media and imagery can be, especially. So I came across this quote when I was doing some research on your organization, and this is something that really moved me. The fact that your organization as a whole is so connected to driving change, it's the best part of faith. It's that sense of community, that sense of welcoming and belonging, and we know that you have incredible stories to tell, and we want to be able to help you do this. And that's what we'll do with what I call the scene approach. So yesterday we touched on social media, different platforms, things such as content, the world and the physical world are now being blended together. So that in itself culminates towards what scene is. So especially when telling these kinds of narratives that are sometimes a little bit trickier to get across, sometimes a little bit, people really struggle to connect with a topic unless it affects them directly. So we found ways through mobile journalism, through empowering communities with tools and creating immersive experiences that were able to just evoke a different kind of empathy when telling stories that are a little bit more difficult. So I know that you've gone through extensive Mojo training since this morning, but just to augmented reality and kind of fused Mojo together where we've enhanced the storytelling experience. So people think to make professionally quality films you need 4K cameras, flashy backgrounds, really fancy equipment, but a cell phone is so powerful that it captures every single one of those elements in one. People underestimate the power of a cell phone. Our CEO calls it a Ferrari in your back pocket, but we only know how to drive it in first gear. People don't understand how impactful a cell phone can be in these cases. And we found that although now you've got your mobile devices, you've got a story you want to tell, but people don't know how. They don't know how to get their point across. They're not very good at expressing themselves or visually bringing their stories to life. And that's where we've come in. We've really focused on the how and how to give people the tools to be able to tell and share their stories. So this is what we call our little iceberg. And traditional media is at the top of the iceberg, social media is at the top. You're hearing from different influencers, different figures. We're hearing from the Kylie Jenners of the world. And unfortunately, below the surface are the big stories at the bottom. It's the people, the migrants, the refugees who have important narratives to tell, but their voices are muffled because of this iceberg. So we saw that as an opportunity to use mobile journalism to help bring their stories to the forefront and help get them to float to the top. So with World Vision specifically, we worked with them with World Refugee Day, and we worked with Job and we empowered them and we trained their communities to tell the story with the cell phone. And he took us into his refugee camp to show us what kind of issues he's facing. So I'm just going to play the first few seconds of this so you get an idea. Oopsie. Okay, it's all good, it's not playing, but essentially he takes us into his community and explains that these are the issues that they face as migrants, as refugees in a refugee camp. And it's such a heartbreaking story, but it makes you feel a lot more empathy and a lot more understanding towards the issues that they face on a daily basis. So once people have the idea of Mojo and they're able to now quite literally capture their stories, we actually have to give them the tools. They aren't able to get their narratives across without training, without direction. It's something that really helps just to elevate the storytelling experience and make sure that they're reaching the points and getting their story across. So the scene approach, we do this in 4 very easy for us kind of steps. And the first is that we train people. You can see in the first slide, using augmented reality, we kind of hop on Zoom calls, and we take them through the storytelling process in great detail, how to structure narratives. We then explain augmented reality and how that tool will help them tell their stories. And then we remotely direct them. So once they've got this training, they know exactly how to use the tools that we've given them, they go out into the field and shoot. And we're on WhatsApp, ready to answer any questions. They send through almost feedback, constant feedback as they're going along. And so once we've got all of that information, all of the footage from that day, we then do the edit and we structure the narrative together with them. And then we distribute it to all of our subscribers across platforms. So we found that this is really, really useful to harness our leverage our audience, especially Gen Z audiences, and make sure that they're hearing these stories. And then the last part of that is the experience side.
And you at my life and yours. We are here.
Estamos aprendiendo a empoderarnos.
Junto con Plan Internacional, we change things in our community for better. Thanks for watching my story.
So you'd assume something like that was some high-end production. It looks very well put together and well polished, if anything. And it was such a simple process that caused so much impact, especially for Plan International and for us as a brand as well. Now, the immersive experience was what really helped this process a lot. So because this is all remote direction, augmented reality really helps just direct people, quite literally. You'll see in this example where we're able to give them tools and film, and we'll give them direction. So the directional AR tells you, hold your phone up to the screen, in 1 second tell us what your name is, and in the next 5 seconds explain what you do. So there's a directional element to augmented reality where it can direct people into telling their stories. And there's also a visual element. So the visual element is that first one, as you can see, where we're able to bring the user into a different space as they're telling a story. So with World Vision, again, for World Refugee Day, we created augmented reality lenses that people could use all around the world and actually explore refugee camps as they're hearing narratives, just so that they get a sense of the environment. And people also misunderstand the use of AR and gamification. And it's something that is not just fun, it's educational. And especially with World Vision for World Food Day, we created a lens where people had to make really difficult decisions. And by the end of it, they found out that the questions that they were answering are things that people have actually had, like the kind of questions they actually had to decide for themselves as they experienced hunger. Oops. But Yeah. Essentially, it's just a little trailer where it shows you what the gamified versions of augmented reality looks like and how that can be really educational and fun as well at the same time and get important issues across, especially when discussing migrants and refugees. It can be quite heavy, but this is a way to really lighten the topics and engage with not only the fun interactive elements, but the topic at hand, which is the core issue of, creating that change, understanding, empathy. So you have all of these elements that come together. They all culminate into viral video. That's essentially it. The augmented reality turns into a video. All of this content needs to be told really well, and it needs to come together. And this is where I'll introduce my 10 steps that we didn't get to yesterday. So just to recap, the 10 steps are quite important. You need to look at planning your content, how to actually choose a story, how to structure it. Once you know what to do, you need to figure out how you're going to sequence it, how to use openings, video formats, shooting, what optimization is, etc., etc. So the first thing is to have a plan. I think any content in any way, if you're wanting to make an impact, it needs to be very well planned. You can't post things for the sake of it. It has to be quite intentional. So this, again, just is the process of deciding what you want to say, how you're going to say it, what platforms it shows up on, and how you're wanting to project your message on social media specifically. And to keep people engaged, you need to have this constant stream coming in at all times. So that is the first bit. Consistency is key with your planning. You can't, people call it ghosting and posting and ghosting, where you just post and you disappear. And you come back a few months later and you disappear. That's how you lose interest in a topic. So you have to be consistent with it as you're going along. And you also really need to think of how it shows up on social media. Your social media is your organization's billboard, essentially. Trends and viral audio. This can be a little bit tricky when discussing really serious issues, but there are ways to integrate that into your content where people are interested and engaged because it's something they relate to, but now they're also learning something new.
I'll be the rubber band, you be the match, I will be a few. Boom, painter baby, you can feel you. I'm the reporter baby, you can feel you.
A little bit of a crazy look to her as well, but it keeps people engaged and really interested in a topic at hand. The next thing is quite interesting, and that's to use social platforms as search engines. And that gives you a feel of what is out there, what kind of content you should be covering, and how just to structure yourself as a business. You have to compare yourself to everybody else. When I came here, I did not use Google to find out what cool restaurants, what sites I should be seeing. I went straight to TikTok. So using those as elements and really looking for something on socials contributes towards your content plan. It gives you a sense of direction. And just creating a library of content. I think the nicest thing about TikTok is if someone is interested in your video and they decide to click through to your page, they'll now find a full library of other information that they might have just stumbled upon. There's that little TikTok rabbit having a content library. And that's basically just making sure, again, you're consistent, you're posting, you've got almost a bank of stories that are on your profile and ready for people to discover. Understanding your audience is imperative here. You can't have a strategy without understanding who you're trying to target, especially in the case of Gen Z. Yesterday we went into extensive details on our interests, what we like, who we are as a demographic, and ways to connect with us. And it starts with just putting together what that looks like visually. Like, what does your ideal audience member look like in a little sticker, for example? And you measure the stories that you're trying to tell based on that ideal audience member. So you need to think about what do they want, what are their interests, how old are they, what religions do they come from, what kind of countries are they from, what sort of issues would they relate to, and how are you beneficial to them. So building that audience profile is really, really helpful and informs your broader strategy of engagement. So story selection is an interesting one. Once you have all of these narratives, it's very easy to get caught up in many, many different stories, but being able to select the right one is important. Telling the right story and captivating people with that is probably imperative within your whole strategy. You actually need to know what kind of stories you need to tell. So we have a little scene checklist that we use, and we ask 3 very key questions. Is the story itself visual? Is it visually interesting to look at? Is it something that people would want to click through and watch? Is it debatable? Has it caused conversations? Does it leave people interacting with the post? Is it something that is so interesting that people are now debating it? And do people care? I think the topic of care is quite a tricky one as well, but unfortunately there are some issues that people do care about and some others, so having a consideration for if Gen Z would care about this topic is vital. So, for example, this is a story on a blind Aussie cyclist. Just by show of hands, who do you think this is a visual story? Great. Do you think it's something that's debatable? Perfect. And do you think people care? So you were all correct. Unfortunately, it's not a visual story. It's limited to one visual throughout, and it's very hard to tell the story here. It's something that's not debatable either. Her condition is fixed. There's not much we can do. There's no conflict. There's not much you can do around that story. And do people care? I think because it is the Olympics, it might have a topic of interest, but outside of that, unfortunately not. So this is a story on a girl from South Africa who is in kidney failure. And I'm not too sure if everyone is familiar with the concept of load shedding, but this is our government. They turn the electricity off for a few hours in a day to try and lessen the pressure off of our grid system. Because of things like historical debt, we're now in a place where we have to experience load shedding so that we can keep electricity flowing through the country. And so this girl, basically, her life is at risk as every time the lights go off, her dialysis machine goes off, and it's really, really tricky for her. And she's very young. She's about in her 20s. And this is something that ticks all the boxes. It's visual because you can see it. You can see the kind of struggles that she experiences. You can see visibly what her disability is and why this is such an important topic. Is it debatable? It definitely is. The topic of load shedding in South Africa comes up very often. It's almost a conversational topic nowadays where everyone just airs their disgraces and they're upset over it. So it's something that's debatable. On the one half, the country understands that it's something that we need to do, but on the other half, it's just unnecessary because it comes from a lack of debt and historical debt within the system due to corruption. And do people care? They really, really do. When you see a young person suffering and having her life being threatened by things outside of her own control, it really does evoke that sense of empathy and care. So now that you've got the story that you're wanting to tell, you need to know how to structure it. And traditionally, in traditional media, you start broad. You start with the newsworthy information, the things that everyone wants to know. And then you funnel down into the smaller details. So you'll set up the big who, what, where, how, then you'll explain the details, and then you funnel into some contextual information. So it's quite broad. You kind of start sensationalist, and then you bring it in. With viral video, you flip that on its head. The structure is it's quite stagnant. We want to hook you in, and we want to drag the story out, and we take you on this narrative as the story anticlimaxes. So you'll see in the first bit, once people have that hint of curiosity and they're pulled in, you have to drag the suspense out until you get to the climactic part of the story. And that's where they really get interested, because you've honed them in, you've piqued their interest, and now you're at your turning point, and people want to know more. They want to find out how the story goes. And then you'll explain that and gradually decline the story. And it will end off with almost a key takeaway. It's like, what was the point of me watching that? I've watched someone go through something. This was the turning point in their story, and now this is the learnings and my key takeaways as to what I can learn from them and their lived experiences. So viral video is quite a process. You really have to focus on bringing people in. It's those first 3 seconds to bring them into the narrative, and then you hold their interests within that time. Openings. These are imperative. Openings are they're basically those 3 seconds that you've got to hook people in. And you do that with visuals, and you do that with spoken words. And openings decide whether people are going to watch your content or not. we've got 3 seconds to hook them in and keep them going. So opening visuals should be quite unusual and highly engaging. You want to stop people from scrolling through their feed and wonder, what are they looking at? For example, the first one is this strange, oddly satisfying, but it leaves you wondering, why is he crushing a balloon? Why is it triggering some very, this part of my brain that's quite satisfying? And you'll see guys flipping through the air. Why is he flipping through the air on my screen? And especially with the last one, you just see a trailer coming crashing through. These are quite engaging visuals, and it keeps us hooked in because we're wondering what's going on, and we're wanting to watch more to find out. Statements, these are those first, it's the first sentence, essentially, and this can make or break your video. If people weren't interested in the visuals, hearing about the story and opening strong is what will keep them in. And you can see in these statistics, this is the exact same story, but we rejigged the opening, and it's 6,000 views versus 271 views. That is how important those opening few sentences are. So I'll just play the first few.
At the age of 14, I was shot and paralyzed from the neck down. I have partial movement of my right arm, but I can't move my fingers.
This is Lewis. He wrote the book, The Bullet That Saved My Life.
Tell us the story about the bullet that saved your life.
Years and years of selling drugs.
When the bullet hit me, it hit my main artery. So blood started shooting out my face, and I grabbed my face and I
So, sorry, I just have to skip to the next one, but basically those openings were very, very different. One started with the context of, I live with a disability and I was shot, whereas the other restructured the narrative and told us, how did a bullet actually save your life? And that really piqued interest because people wouldn't think that it's something that would aid in saving somebody else's life. So having an understanding of ways to really hook people in and engage them is really important. Shooting is also really, really good with, I know you've gone through a whole mobile journalism course this morning, so I'm gonna fly through these ones, but the way you capture the content and visually tell the story and then structure it all together, it culminates into this engaging video, and the visuals play the biggest role in this. So even before you start shooting the visuals, it helps to storyboard the concept and to storyboard and figure out what kind of story you're trying to tell. Just a few shots, visual ideas. For example, if you're telling a story in a refugee camp, you want to actually start with filming the individual explaining the context. Then you want to get a shot of the actual camp. Then you want to get some detailed shots of communities interacting. So the storyboard just gives you a very basic idea of the kind of scenes you're wanting to capture, and that helps with the whole planning sequence. B-roll, this is just capturing kind of background imagery that you will use to enhance the storytelling. And B-roll is so important. It can be anything, as long as it helps to set the tone of the piece. It helps to create interest and keeps people engaged. This is just an example of a video that used really good B-roll in it.
You have never seen a library like this, where you can take out a human.
The Human Experience Library is where you pick a topic or subject, but instead of a book, you borrow a person. And instead of reading, you have a conversation. Today, I want to learn about prejudice.
This is Morphe, and I just borrowed him from the Human Library.
So you'll see in that example how the shots of the books and the library and the individual, how that structures towards the understanding of the piece as a whole. Camera movement, I know that's something that was touched on extensively, but having an idea of what you're trying to capture and how you're trying to capture it is really important. If you don't have interesting dynamic movements in your frames, the story kind of falls flat. People want that engagement. They want to look at something interesting every few seconds. Framing, this might seem basic, but making sure that there's enough breathing room around the person is important. We all know if on social media, if you see heads cut out, misshapen faces, it's something that really tends to harm the storytelling. You're going to scroll right past it because it's not interesting to you. So you have to really leave room around the person that you're trying to tell the story around. And then location. So you have to be quite clever here in that it affects things like your audio level, it affects people walking into your shot, so you have to try and find something that's quiet enough, something that still has a little bit of action, a little bit of movement, but almost an environment that you can control. So making sure your location is a suitable environment for capturing is really important in this. And then light. I think this one goes to show for itself. We're all somewhat aware of lighting and the effects that bad lighting can have. And our rule of thumb is to always ensure that the light is behind the camera and not behind the source. As soon as it's behind the source, it darkens the image as a whole. Whereas if it's behind the camera, it lights up the source and it lights up kind of the landscape that you're trying to set up. So making sure that you're having the right lighting in natural lighting is also helpful. Now, optimization. This is key in engagement because you've put in all the work to create these videos, but now you need to make sure that it's optimized, that people are actually seeing your content and seeing your videos. So the algorithm is what helps to optimize your stories. This is almost a buzzword in today's age, the algorithm. You hear it all the time. Social media algorithms, they're always changing. But in today, on social media, watch time is the most important metric of this algorithm. It's basically the amount of time that people spend on your content. So just in short, the algorithm is just a set of rules and signals that just rank content on a platform. So if you're having good rules and signals and everything is approved, you're able to at least elevate yourself on social media especially. So for example, on Facebook, if you, because it's a platform that rather prefers prioritizing friends and family, you're more likely to see content from friends and family only. So being able to boost your metrics and try and kind of angle in a little bit is a way to make sure that it's still getting to the right people who might not be within your network. Instagram just prioritizes the dates of posting really and the popularity of the metrics that you're getting. So if a lot of people are seeing it and clicking through to it, they're likely to boost it in and show it to more people. And TikTok, this is, again, hyper-personalized. What people see are things that they're interested in. So it's using those hashtags, it's making sure that people know how to find you, so that you are showing up on more profiles of people. So the algorithm is basically just these signals that help you get discovered, if anything. And unfortunately, they do change, they're constant. So you have to just keep an eye on your analytics and making sure that you're aware of the changes as they're hitting. So the watch time, as I explained, is just the total time that people spend on watching your content especially. And the only way you increase that watch time is by creating engaging content. If it's not engaging, they're not going to watch it for a long period of time. So these are the combinations of those important things like the visuals, the openings, like the thumbnails, the share text that we'll get into. So you really have to make sure that it's engaging enough to keep them in. Thumbnails. So these are basically, we call them the billboards of your videos. So it's one image that basically tells your story. And you can see it in that Scene TV Twitter feed. That is what a thumbnail is. It's the little cover of the story that you're wanting to tell. It gives people context, and it's what creates interest for them to click through. It's so important that Mr. Beast, he's one of the top viral creators in today's society in 2024. Everything he creates goes absolutely viral. And they start with thumbnails when telling their stories. They don't start with story selection. They start with what the end result will look like. What does the story visually look like? And then they even test it. They've got 20 different versions of each thumbnail. They test it with friends and family to see what creates interest. So that just demonstrates how important thumbnails are. If people aren't clicking through to your video because of the text or the video itself, the thumbnail usually will drag them in, especially if they're coming from outside sources. So share text. This is basically just the caption that goes below your video, and that's just the text at the bottom there, as you can see from TikTok. And it's really important because, again, if people miss your visuals, if they miss your opening statement, if they miss your thumbnails, having an engaging piece of share text and caption is what keeps them reading and keeps them actually interested. It might bring them back to your video if they were scrolling past it. And the best way I can describe how to put together good share text is if you're posting, for example, about a bunch of flowers, it's something that's diverse. There's so many different things. And that's what content is. Content, a story in itself is made up of many different elements, but you have to be able to pull out the right elements and use that in your share text. So it should evoke a call to action. For example, if you are selling the flowers, your caption should include, if you're interested, click through to the link in our bio and we're wanting to, that's where you can find the bouquet. So it's once you've got people in, you now direct them to another source and you keep them engaged with yourself as a brand. Creating dialogue. This is also really good for engagement because it keeps people talking, it keeps them on your page. And the way that you do that is by simply asking a question. We've got these beautiful bouquet of flowers, but you simply ask, what's your favorite flower? And you'll see the comments flooding with various people interacting with the post. And that just creates natural engagement because you were able to just create a dialogue by just simply asking a question. Emojis. We are the fun generation, so we love the use of emojis. We love that it takes a serious topic into a lighter bit of a situation. So emojis in your shared text is quite helpful. And again, hashtags. The discoverability in shared text especially it's imperative. You need a hashtag to be discovered. So even though you've got this bright bouquet of flowers, you need to be specific. You need to find the people who like roses and you go into their community. You need to find the people who prefer the sunflowers and you need to go into the community. So it's almost a skill to be able to have all of this content in front of you, but know how to pull out the good elements of it so that you're reaching the right communities and you're going broader than just a simple bunch of flowers. You're reaching many, many people. Analytics. So this is the last step because it's one of the most important. Again, you've gone through this process of creating content, and now you need to make sure that it's still performing, that you're still getting engagement, and that you're keeping it on people's social media feeds. And yeah, keep them in mind. They inform your next content decision. If a video did really badly and the analytics weren't great, you know that that is a topic that won't necessarily perform. You then have to analyze, for example, was it the opening statement? Was it the visuals? So it really helps just to inform the next decision. So maybe next time you'll choose a different story or you'll open it with a different line. Those are the kinds of things that analytics do. And they just help in all to even help you find trends in your content and what people find engaging for you as a brand. Sentiment as a whole also helps here. You understand what kind of elements of your brand people enjoy and what they keep coming back to and interacting with. And then just overall return on investment. A lot goes into content and content creation. So by using analytics and keeping all of those efforts afloat, it really does pay off and make sure that your content returns back to you and that you're getting the engagement that you're looking for. So some of the key indicators across the board are likes, comments, link clicks, sharing, and saves. Now, likes are basically just people who have stopped to watch your content, so they've just liked it and they've moved on. Comments are those who decide to start a conversation. Those are really important because now you've piqued interest. Now you've got people coming and engaging with you. And link clicks just show that they want to know more. They want to visit your profile, click on your page and find out more about who you are. So you've been able to drag them in and keep them interested and wanting to know more about you. Now, sharing and saves are actually the most important metrics. So sharing, people wanting to share that and tell others is brilliant. They're wanting to share that and distribute it beyond your own efforts. So the sharing indicator shows that you really are onto something. It's caused almost global reach where people are interacting with it beyond just the community that you were trying to focus in on. And then saves. These are important because your content is so good that people are wanting to watch it over and over again. So if you can balance and really peak your analytics on your shares and your saves and focus on creating content where those indicators are peaking, it's easy from there because it's once you've got these metrics in place, everything runs on its own. So being aware of likes and comments and link clicks, yes, they're really good and important metrics. However, if you are getting the shares and saves, it's something that is a lot more beneficial and where you should focus your efforts on these analytics. And this is just an image on the overview of what you can see. It also gives you an overview of your audience members so that you know who you're actually reaching, what kind of demographics, what ages. It gives you quite a range, but in terms of things that kind of matter and inform your content, it's those likes, comments, shares, link clicks. And lastly, safeguarding. I think there is a big responsibility that comes with sharing stories and telling narratives. So as a brand, as a business, just as individuals, especially when telling narratives on migrants and refugees, it's something that is so sensitive. You have to really make sure that you get consent, both on camera and off camera, from these people. It can be written, it can be verbal, it can be visual, but consent is always guaranteed. And then you also have to understand the sensitivities and laws. So naturally, people won't be willing to share their stories in certain contexts and certain countries, and we have to respect that and find other ways of telling those stories. Maybe retracting some statements and reworking the narrative where they feel a bit safer. So you have to also understand that broader community that they're in. And then also always protect your source. Never share the information. Never put them in situations where they feel unsafe. Especially children. Children don't have the ability to advocate for themselves, so you have a responsibility as journalists, as storytellers, to make sure that your source is always first. And lastly, get in touch. We absolutely love telling stories, driving narratives, and we really understand social media and connecting with the youth. And if it's something that interests your offices and it's something you'd like to take further, we're readily available and really excited to help you tell your stories. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you very much. So now it's time for questions. We have 15 minutes.
Great.
We don't need to rush like yesterday. We have some nice questions, maybe 7, 8, but they are still coming. So the first one would be that, is migration necessary? People escape one's own country because of unrest and fight. Do they have a safe haven even in the country they go? Can we not do something to bring peace in the country from where they escape? What's your take on it?
Oh, that's a big question.
Of course.
I think certain situations, it's varied and it's different. Everybody has different driving forces as to why they need to leave their countries. There's different places that they go to, different societies, so it's relative to the person at hand. But I think this is where social media comes in creating those safe environments so that people are aware that when you do come across somebody who is a migrant or a refugee, you know how to treat them properly. You understand the struggles that you've gone through, and you are responsible for aiding and really fostering a community. So I think social media helps to shape those narratives. It's really hard to control the situations that they come from, and it's unfortunate because it does happen, but I think the responsibility is more of the people that they interact with, the communities that they enter, and the narratives that they project as well. And social media just helps to shape that and make them feel a lot more welcomed in spaces and less vulnerable. So I think from that perspective, it's really helpful. But unfortunately, the broader issue at hand is something that is relative, and it's a very big topic that I actually don't have the answer to.
No, it's not easy. It's not really easy. All right, let's move on. The questions are coming up. In many places, the internet is poor and refugees do not have access to social media, to internet. In that case, does it make any sense to create content for them or about them?
So we've obviously experienced this a lot, and we found very creative ways of still being able to reach even the remote communities. So for example, with the 43 Plan project, there were kids who never had access to cell phones, and they were able to connect with neighbors, friends, families within their communities. The adoption of mobile phones is so saturated that you will find at least one within these remote communities. So we help them just kind of, getting them through the process of how to even navigate a phone. And when it comes to the content part of it, it is hard, especially with really bad internet connections, to get it through. So we create, for example, PDFs or images or GIFs of the narratives that we're trying to tell, and that can go to any cell phone, even a basic MMS. They're able to receive and see a GIF play out in very basic steps of a video. So we've been able to use stills and those GIFs to still reach the people without content. And at least with the visuals, we provide a lot of text, a lot of visual direction. Like those little storyboards that you saw, we would storyboard out different things that we're trying to communicate with them. We've done that with GNC, for example. They were trying to do breastfeeding awareness for young mothers in rural areas. And we created a series of GIFs and posters that they could share on social media, that they could share via SMS, share on WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is also quite common. So we were still able to create content and reach them, even though it wasn't video content necessarily.
All right, thank you very much. We are moving on. Why do you think the world and the media in Europe talk so little about refugees in Africa and Asia? Also, they are repeatedly silent about the wars in so many countries, especially in Africa and Asia.
Yeah, I think it's a global issue, and it all stems from a lack of empathy, which is why we do what we do. We really want to drive that feeling of empathy and understanding. And unfortunately, traditional media has none. They drive things that would sell. They drive narratives that are negative because they know that's what people, or they think that's what people want to consume. And unfortunately, it's a global issue where migrant issues and refugees aren't being heard because they don't care. They'd rather float who Trump or what Trump is doing this week, or Biden or Kamala Harris. They'd rather tell those narratives and sensationalize that than tell the real stories. And I think it's just how traditional media has been. It's the learnings, it's historical, unfortunately. There's no sense of good news anymore these days. We're trying to see them and we're starting to see them come up. But traditional media especially is just really stuck in their ways, and that's affected the broader issues at hand.
Right, excellent, thank you. Do you know any interesting cases of communication on refugees in different countries in the Catholic Church?
Oh, I do not specifically in that case, but I know there's some interesting ways how information will spread within refugee camps, and how information is disseminated across the border, even though there isn't access. People find ways. There's individuals who help. Those cases are quite interesting to see, that even though you've got access to next to nothing, you will always find a way to get communication across. But I'm not too sure in terms of the Catholic.
Right. Next question: how are migrants and refugee movements changing the social media narrative globally?
Oh, I think it's been something that has opened all of our eyes up as a generation and everybody as a whole, because we've got this information at our fingertips. Social media has really enhanced this feeling of empathy because you're seeing somebody experience it now. Before, we just saw still images on the front of a newspaper, but now you're seeing people experiencing them. For example, we've got Seen Palestine, where we cover stories out of Gaza, and we created a documentary for our colleague, and as he was escaping, he showed us day by day the visuals, and we turned it into a documentary, and we had screenings, and people were so captivated by that. That in itself, a simple documentary where you can see and feel what someone else has gone through, it's really good. It helps just to solidify that human approach to stories. It makes you feel them more than just seeing them and hearing them. And I think especially in stories like migrants and refugees, we saw with baby Alan, we've seen with the young girl in the vulture as well, for example, that it really stirs up a lot of understanding and empathy, and people want to help. There's times where they don't know how, and social media also tells them how. It's the little culmination of, yes, you can help, this is how, and here are the issues you're seeing.
All right, one more question. Give us, please, one more time, some simple tips and tricks on how to communicate with refugees and how to communicate about refugees. Two things: how to communicate with them and about them.
I think in terms of communicating with them, it's really important that you remember that you're communicating with a human, with an individual. I think people forget that at the end of the day, we are human. We want to connect as you would socially with anybody else. We're not something that should be treated like we're alienated. So I think that would be my first tip on how to communicate with refugees. Treat them as your own. Treat them as if they're a part of your community, and really welcome them in. And that's how you really get people to open up and understand what they're going through and how you can actually help. So you have to be really human about it. And in terms of being able to speak about refugees, again, it's making sure that the narratives that you tell personally capture the person as they are, who they are. They're people. They've gone through really, really difficult experiences. They really struggle through life, and being able to communicate that with a sense of empathy, and you're telling people and sharing that this is an individual who's gone through all of this, but here they are. I think it just helps to discuss them in a positive light, which is something we don't see all the time. It's quite nice to have that responsibility, because your projections and your thoughts and your feelings on topics like that, and by sharing them, can impact the community around you.
Some more questions are coming. All right. About mobile journalism, is it Mojo to be used also in refugee camps or refugee settlements by people, Salesians living and working there, like in Uganda, Kenya, and Congo?
Sorry, could you please repeat the first half of the question?
Is the mobile journalism to be used also in refugee camps or refugee settlements by people, Salesians living, working there?
Absolutely. I think that's the easy bit about a phone. It can go everywhere, anywhere and everywhere. As long as you've got a charger and a battery pack, you can use them. It's much better than broadcast cameras. You can see them all around the room. It's really hard to transport a camera into these spaces, but it's really easy to get a phone in. And as long as you know how to use it and capture content correctly, you don't need anything else. But I think that's the benefit of it, the fact that you've got all of this power at your fingertips and you're able to tell really captivating stories quite easily. It's really convenient.
Right, 2 more questions. One I need to translate very fast from French.
Oh, good.
Okay, so the first one is in English. How does CNTV get permission to use minor or children-produced content?
So that's where we've got safeguarding policies in place where we'll ask for written consent, especially from the parents, from the child themselves. The organizations will get involved and also sign off rights. So we have various layers to ensure that the child is protected. They've given consent via their parents, they've given consent directly, and they've also given consent to the organization. And apart from that, you also really have to inform people where their content is going. They can't agree to something if they don't understand what the broader topic is, what you're trying to do. So we really take the time to sit and explain what we're trying to do with their story, how we're going to tell it, where it's going to show up. We explain even the dynamics of social media and how we're going to use it on these various platforms so that they understand what they're signing off to. So the safeguarding, especially from children, is imperative. You can't tell narratives without that. So we try to have the various layers, even just making sure we get the consent on camera, we get it written. We try just to cover all of our bases to make sure that every step of the way, a child is aware of what they're getting themselves into.
And there was one more question, more or less similar. How do you deal with images of children and even adult refugees on social?
Yeah. I think it's always nice to put a face to individuals. It's very hard, especially traditional media. You see migrants and refugees as these anonymous people. You can't necessarily put a face to it. So, we'll explain that. And most times they want to be seen. They want people to see them as they are, the way that they're living. They want to be out there and open and share their stories. So we haven't really had issues with that. But in cases where people do want to be anonymous, we use augmented reality. So we'll create filters to blur out their faces so they can still participate. For example, our co-founder and CEO was in India in 2016, and he was covering stories from rape survivors in India. And it was very difficult, but the ladies really wanted to tell their story. They wanted to be seen, they wanted to be heard, but they were just so worried about all of the instability in their region and the societal pressures of experiencing what they've experienced. So we put little augmented reality filters. It was a little dragon face, and as they spoke, they were protected, they were covered. They could see on the screen that we were hiding their identities, so they were a lot more comfortable with sharing because they knew that we were giving them the amount of anonymity that they had wanted.
Excellent, thank you. One more question. In a Salesian context of our Salesian family, Salesian congregation, we think especially about younger generation and communication through social media with younger generation among refugees. What strategies can we, according to you, to your knowledge, what strategies can we apply in the Salesian family, in our work for raising awareness about migrants and refugees among the younger generation?
So I think that's, again, just making sure that you're tapping into social media, you're knowing how to use it, how to create impact, and how impactful it is. I think having that understanding, being able to create content is also really important. You've got really important stories to tell, but you need to get people to care about it. So having that understanding first of what social media is, the power of it, but also how to create for it, how to engage people, and then how to keep that going. that is all really important. So you have to be really well versed on your strategy. You've got to have really good plans in place. You've got to have a very clear path for what you're trying to do and achieve, especially with social media. So I think the success lies in the broader idea of wanting to achieve what you want to achieve and mapping that out.
And maybe the last question, what do people in your country, in Africa, think and talk about the war in Ukraine, in Europe?
I think it's something that's definitely divided us as well. It's a very hard sore topic. It's very hard to watch. It's very hard to see. It's one of those things where, you know, there's wars and there are things happening all over the world, so you feel it regardless of the region. I mean, I personally feel it regardless if it's Gaza, if it's Ukraine. It's some society that is going through, you know, an unfair and unjust experience, and they're losing their lives. So I think at home we all feel that sense of just sadness and the fact that we want to help and we want to be there. South Africa's come from a long history of resilience. We've gone through our own historical challenges. So when these things do break out, we immediately feel it ourselves. We've gone through these hardships. You'll see South Africans, especially on social media, telling people like, push through, we've been here, keep trying. You'll see almost across the world, we've seen in Gaza, South Africans are forward and front and center with advocating for their rights because we know what it feels like. So when it comes to wars, especially in Ukraine, all over the world, it's something that really does resonate with us as a nation.
Migrants and refugees in the context of communicating with the younger generation through social media, Laura Wagner-Meyer, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Three, four, coffee break, half an hour coffee break, and the last presentation with Andy Stalman, who is here with us. Coffee break. We need some coffee.
Hola, hola, probando. Sí, se escucha bien. Sí, se escucha bien. Gracias a todos por venir. Gracias a todos por venir.
Nosotros. Un aplauso. Ahora cambiamos al español. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Cominciamo. Eccoci. Buenas tardes y ahora cambiamos al español.
So good afternoon, good evening. Now we will change language where we speak Spanish.
¿Cómo puede la Iglesia Católica comprender mejor en su trabajo las
How can the Catholic Church better understand its work, the digital transformations, which are being developed in the modern world?
Andy Stalman es una autoridad en branding.
Andy Stalman is an authority in the branding field, a futurist, a world leader in the field with more than 30 years experience. He developed projects in 5 continents. His work has a lot of influence in the branding world. He's one of the main experts in the branding world.
Prestigiosas escuelas de negocios, asesora
It teaches in important business schools.
sobre branding y transformación digital.
Is a consultant for several companies on personal branding and digital transformation.
Barack Obama.
He shared.
Ha hablado para empresas.
So he took part in conferences and congresses, and he shared the stage with important people such as Barack Obama. He went to several continents to give his speech, and I give him the floor for the last session of today.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Bueno, ¿cómo están? ¿Bien? ¿Sí?
How are you? Is everything okay?
Muy bien. ¿Sí?
Somebody's very, very well,
¿Sí?
and someone is great,
Si me permite,
right? Fantastic.
a mí me dieron una
So if you allow
ni
me,
siquiera empecé a hablar, espero que me quieran aplaudir cuando termine de hablar.
so they give me a round of applause. I haven't
Quiero pedir
even
un favor
started
especial,
to speak. I hope there will be
porque
another one
parte de
when
mi
I finish
trabajo
talking.
es
So
divulgar
a part of
mi
my job
actividad en los 5 continentes.
is
Y tengo
to
la suerte de estar casi todas las
disseminate
semanas
my
en algún
activities in
destino
the 5
diferente,
continents,
hablando a
and
audiencias
I'm lucky
diferentes.
enough to
Son
be almost
creo que se
every
pueden
week in a
manejar las
different
masas y creo
place.
que las
I
masas
talk to
pueden
different
contribuir
audiences,
a ser parte
and
de un
so
cambio positivo en el
about
mundo.
how we can make
Pero
brands more
permítanme
human,
decirles
how
que la
brands can
organización
contribute
para
to a
participar de este
positive change
encuentro
in the world.
con
But
todos
allow me
ustedes,
to say
con
that
Eduardo, con el
the
padre Manuel, con todo
organization
el
to
equipo de la familia
participate in
salesiana,
meetings
incluso
like
con
this
las chicas
with all
de
the
traducción,
team
que ustedes no las
of the
ven, pero están
Salesian
haciendo un
family,
excelente trabajo.
and also
Ha
with
sido
the
de lo
interpreters
más
that you don't
humano, lo
see
más
but
profesional,
are doing a
lo más
wonderful
cercano que me
job.
ha tocado vivir.
It's been
Así que si
one
me
of the most
permiten, quería
human and
pedirles un fuerte
professional
aplauso
things,
para
one of
todos
the things that
aquellos
I've
que han hecho
seen. So
posible
a
que
round
estemos
of
hoy acá hoy
applause to all these
disfrutando de
people
este evento.
that
Gracias.
have made this event
Un
possible
fuerte
today.
aplauso, un fuerte aplauso. Eso es un fuerte aplauso.
Stronger, louder. Okay, this is a very loud
Bueno,
round of
entonces,
applause.
la charla de hoy es como el primer tiempo de un partido.
Okay, so
Mañana a la mañana
today's
está el segundo
speech
tiempo,
is like the
donde
first
vamos a
half
aterrizar
of
mucho
a
más
match.
al tema de la
Tomorrow there will be
marca
the
y del
second
branding.
half,
Lo que
and
vamos a
we
ver hoy
will
es un poco más
elaborate
macro
more
y un poco
on
más global.
brands
Están
and branding.
pasando muchísimas
Today we
cosas
will
en
talk
el
about
mundo. Es
branding from a
probable
general point of
que
view.
lo que llamábamos
Several
el nuevo
things are
orden
happening in
mundial
the
hoy
world,
podamos llamarlo
and
el nuevo
probably
desorden
what we
mundial.
used to call a
Pero también
new
es cierto que en
world
tiempos de
order now can be
desorden y de
called a
crisis
new world
emergen
disorder. But it is
oportunidades y
true that in
posibilidades.
times of
Y yo me quiero
crisis,
enfocar en todo
there are
aquello que
great
puede ser
opportunities and
constructivo y
possibilities. I
positivo
want to
a la
focus
hora de
on
construir.
everything that can
Como
be
todos
positive and
ustedes
constructive
están en el
when we
ámbito de la
have to
comunicación de
build
manera más
something,
directa
because
o
you
menos
are
directa, les quiero
communicators
pedir
and you work in a
otro
communication
favor,
field
o
in a
mejor
more
dicho,
or
les
less
quiero plantear
direct
un
way.
desafío.
So I want to ask you a favor, or
Quiero
actually
conocer
I
en
want
primera
to
persona
suggest a
cuál es el
challenge. I
alcance
want to
que este
know
encuentro que estamos compartiendo desde el 1 hasta el 7
I
tiene
want
hacia
to
afuera.
know
¿Sí? Todo el
to
mundo
what
acá tiene al
extent
menos un perfil
this
en alguna red
meeting can
social.
have. So from 1 to 7,
Levante la mano
where
el que
we
tiene, por
can
ejemplo, cuenta en
go.
Instagram.
Who has a profile on social
Bien.
networks? Raise your hand if you have
Entonces
an
el ejercicio
Instagram
es el
profile.
siguiente. Todo el mundo
Fantastic.
está siguiendo
So
la cuenta
the
de este congreso,
exercise is the
de este
following.
encuentro. ¿Sí? Todo el
Do
mundo
you
lo
all
sigue.
follow
Bien.
the
Entonces, vamos a
profile of this
buscar una foto que
congress?
esté buena.
The
Por
profile of this
ejemplo,
event, the
esta.
account of this event?
¿Sí?
Okay.
Me hacen una foto.
So
Yo me
let's
pongo un poco guapo así, por ejemplo.
find a
¿Sí?
photo. So take me a
Pongo así.
picture and I will pose. Or like this.
¿Sí?
Okay, did you take a picture of me?
Iguales, ¿sí? ¿Ok?
I changed my position,
Y al final
otherwise the photos are all the
al terminar
same.
esta conferencia, todo el mundo
Super.
comparte una
So
foto
now at the end of this conference,
arroba
everybody
a la cuenta
can
de la
share a
conferencia y
photo
pone
with
maravillosa, extraordinaria
by tagging
conferencia de
the
antistalman.
account
No, eso no
of
hace
this
falta ponerlo.
conference
Pongan lo
and
que ustedes
saying
quieran. Pero si todos
extraordinary,
lo ponemos al
wonderful
mismo tiempo cuando
conference
termine
of
esto, quiero
anti-solvent. No,
ver el
I'm
eco y la
joking. You can
resonancia
say
que podemos
everything you want.
conseguir.
But if we
¿Ok? ¿Cuentan
agree
con
in the
ustedes?
same moment
¿Sí? Si
to
arroban
do something like
antistalman,
that, we
yo
will
también
see
voy
the
a estar
type of
participando de esa
effect that
conversación.
this can have. Can
Bueno,
I count on you?
terminamos con
So
las
if you tag me, I
introducciones y
will
vamos a lo que
post
vinimos.
and
Lo
share
que les voy a
and
compartir
interact with you. So
no es
I
una
finished my
aproximación ni
introduction. So
teórica
main
ni
topic now. What I
académica
want to share with
de
you
estos grandes
today
cambios
is not
paradigmáticos que estamos
something
viendo, algunos
theoretical,
sufriendo y otros
academic about
disfrutando.
these
Es
great
el
changes
resultado
we are
de los
experiencing,
viajes
maybe
por proyecto
suffering
o por clase
and
o por
exploiting. This
conferencia
is the
que voy dando
result
en los 5
of the
continentes.
trips
Y
of the
como pueden
different
apreciar,
projects and
hay
conferences
ciudades que están
which
en
I
países
carry
con
out in the
economías
5
muy
continents. As you can
desarrolladas,
see, there
hay
are
otras ciudades en
cities
países que
which are in
están en
countries
economías
with
ni siquiera en vías de
developed
desarrollo.
economies,
No hay
others
algo
in countries
transversal
with
y común a todos los
developing
cambios
economies, but there is
paradigmáticos.
something
En el
common to
corazón
all
del cambio
paradigmatic
no está la
changes.
tecnología,
In the heart
está
of change, there is
la
no
persona, ni más
technology.
ni menos.
What do we
Y yo
find?
sé
the person, only the person. And I know it might look and sound trivial and obvious, but we are talking, we are listening about the digital transformation. Transformation is cultural, social, emotional, and for sure it's human. The technological tools allow us to go further, to reach more people, to better know things, to better measure, to assess better, and to have a stronger effect. But in order to understand change, we have to put the person at the center. That's why I loved the fact that the opening of this Congress, there was a psychological, sociological opening, and this is what we have to understand. So there is just one change. Is there only one change, or is there just one change that we are experiencing, or more than one? Many changes, many revolutions, which are taking place in a coordinated way, simultaneous way, and accelerated way. So, while we're trying to understand one of these changes, one of these turning point, others are happening in a communication field, in a community field, in training, education, in the transformation world. So, a reality which, in my opinion, is one of the most powerful realities I've ever seen and experienced. When we create connections, when we create value, we cannot stand still waiting for the real conditions. I'm waiting for the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and I'm waiting for the values of the Tokyo Stock Exchange raise. I'm waiting for the end of the problems in Bangladesh. I wait, but what happens while I wait? Relevance takes power on you, and so when we communicate, the best time to do that is when now. So don't forget about the tasks that you have to do at the end of this conference: the start of communication, the construction of branding. The beginning is every day. Of course, we need a vision. We need to understand where we want to get. We need to understand who I want to go with. And we need clarity on who I want to reach, who I'm looking for. If I don't know I want to talk to, who I want to address, I cannot have any conversation. In the current way, in the current world, there are three types of brands. Well, we can divide them in three big groups. The different types of brands: the most loved brands, the hated brands, and the ones which are ignored. Today, any ignored brand has a no-news certificate, a death certificate. For a brand to be loved, we have to wonder, why am I relevant for the life of the people? And I'm important for the life of people, not because I use technology, but because I use technology to get in touch with people. But technology does not give you the sense or the purpose. It gives you the bridge, it gives you the tool, it gets you closer. So instead of placing technology in the hearts of people, I suggest to do the opposite, and so to put people at the center of technology, in the heart of technology. And when this happens, there is a change in the way we interact, we consolidate communities. The world we live in today, from the perspective of who, like me, live in a country that has always been in crisis. 22 years ago, I moved to Madrid, and the world now looks wonderful. In Argentina, we lived crisis, continuous crisis. So when you're born, they give you milk and also manual to survive the crisis. Inside the different paradigms of this dual world, there is something which has always existed. What's old does not die, and what's new doesn't stop existing. And what do we find in ourselves? What's old never stops dying, and what's new never can never raise. And so what do we do? What do we do with what happens around us? What do we do with the experiences we have acquired? And what do we choose? Do we want to attack the future, or do we want to create the future? Shape the future is a declaration of intent. It's very brave, because I'm not trying to guess how this future will be, but I am shaping the future. And in order to do that, I need a vision, I need courage, and a teamwork. In this context, one of the most important changes is the change of the mental chip, of the mindset, the way we think and we see things. Because if we use old maps to discover new places, it will be very difficult. Who among you is brave enough to encounter this new future, create it, dominate it, shape it? So now you will all say, me. So does anybody have this courage? I see a hand raising, 1 or 2 or 3. Okay, she raised herself instead of the hand. Okay. The bad news is that not changing today is more expensive than changing today. Not changing is more difficult than changing. Today, staying as you are doesn't mean to stay in the same place where you are, but going back. And so change is the only constant element in our reality. So changing is inevitable. Changing means to give up everything we've done? No. But what we try to do is not to use the past as a couch, but as as something to jump into the future. So we believe that the great transformation is not digital, neither technological. We are experiencing this type of human history in which transformation is in everybody of us. It is important to be a master of technology in order to have better videos, to have better framing, lighting, to know when to publish a post, knowing who I'm talking to. Everything is important, but the most important thing is to understand who's before us. We don't have 3,000 followers? Okay, then what's the problem? The great dilemma of this world,
la mayoría de nuestra sociedad,
which is full of media, is that the majority of the society is stuck. There are 7.7 million Venezuelans who had to leave Venezuela. And people say, okay, can I have sugar for coffee? But if we say, my friend Elena used to live in Venezuela, went out one night, and she will be arrested because something happened So the interest increases because we're not talking about millions of people, but a single person with a name. So when we talk about general stories with millions of people, we don't emphasize. On the contrary, when we talk about just one person, we can emphasize more the story. Technologies can be understood through empathy. When we understand people, when we understand the stories, and we understand the change, the transformative change that let's change our look, and the way we see things. When we change the way we see things, maybe we change the world. The world doesn't change with words. The world changes with actions. 1 gram of action is worth more than 1 kilos of word, and the strongest communication is the one which maximizes facts, initiatives, projects, actions. But if we don't communicate, we don't exist. So communicating is part of the amplification of a work so that more people can identify themselves in it and be part of it. A work which is action. Action is what really transforms. The distance between how your brand is today and how it wants to be in the future. Not what your brand says, but what your brand does. What transforms is the action. On the other end, we are all filled with information, but we don't have time. We're always in a rush. Shortly, we see the time we spend distracted. But how many people are really connected with what's really happening? Are we so? We are following media so much that we get distracted and we miss clear opportunities because we are always in a rush to do and to go somewhere else. The problem of going who knows where is that any destination that's okay, but it's not the one you were looking for. That's why the brand helps us to establish the vision, which is the compass, the horizon where you want to go. And in this context of shifting paradigms, what companies, brands, institutions, and especially people need is to be brave, because changing requires courage. It is a moment in which we cannot be neutral, we cannot be indifferent. It's a moment in which we must introduce ourselves, especially you that have the future of the youth in your hands. In Spain today, 34% of Spaniards suffer from mental health problems, especially anxiety. I'm talking about one of the countries with the best quality of life in the world. So what happens in the other parts of the world? How do we manage our mental health, anxiety, depression? How do we manage uncertainties, the lack of a project? When it seems, because many media think that the future is black, but this is not the case. Let's make a summary of the impacts which took place in the last few years in technology, which affected our life. What happened on the 13th of March 1984? Do you remember?
Acá veo mucha gente joven que capaz que no se acuerda.
I see a lot of young people here. What maybe you don't remember it. So the first cell phone was this kind of brick, which was like 3 kilo heavy. so you couldn't take it to the gym, and you didn't have to go to the gym because it was a good weight. So it was born in 1973, so 11 years earlier. There had been the first phone call with a cellular phone. Then the first cell phone was created 11 years after. So, first issue, the use of technology in our daily life is slower. And today, on the contrary, it's faster than 20, 30 years ago. Today, technologies come to us much quicker than in the past. And we will see more about this. Another important thing we have to take into account to understand is in what type of land we are. So let's make a short summary, a short recap of crisis and wars. It seemed in the past, it seemed that the world was about to explode. Then in the 20th century, everything was okay. Well, not so much because in 2001 there was 9/11 attack, so war against terrorism and everything you know. So the century started with the great move, 2008, crisis of the subprime, Lehman Brothers, world financial crisis. It seemed the end of the world. Do you remember all these crises? 2020, the pandemic, COVID-19. And then, if we go on, we can talk about Russia, Ukraine, Gaza Strip, and then last week, the crisis in Japan, revolution in Bangladesh, fraud in Venezuela, and many, many more. What we know, what's sure, is that when we see all these crises, of course, we get discouraged. What have we done? What kind of humankind are we? How can we, human beings, do all this? There are 6 or 7 crises just in the 21st century, and in Argentina in 1 week. In Latin America in a week, in Africa maybe a bit more, in some places of Asia a bit less. But let's consider that some time ago we said, let's try not to be discouraged by difficulties because change is necessary for growth. It is a temporal statement which can be applied today, could be applied 100 years ago, 50 years ago, and can be applied in the next 100 years. In the different turmoils, we can get discouraged or we can be brave. And we can see opportunities in problems. And I believe that if we study the different data which tell us how humankind is today, so data rather than opinions, the humankind is never feel better than before in all the indicators of the different centuries, but I don't see smiles. We walk in the street and how are people? Do they smile or do they say, oh, sorry, sorry, sorry? You say hello in the elevator in the hotel and they look at you and say, oh my God, this is a weirdo. So Father Marcial hugged me when I arrived and I said, well, this is the place of the future. There is hope here because we are not afraid one of the other. We hug ourselves. There is some courage. In 2007, do you remember a brand called Nokia? Na 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 na. Well, first page of Forbes read 1 billion customers. Can anyone touch the cell phone ring? Do you know what happened in 2007 when the king of cell phones was the absolute king? A guy who was not afraid, named Stephen Jobs, launched something on the market. Nobody knew what it was, and he called it iPhone. Someone thought about the iPhone before knowing about the existence of the iPhone? I don't think so. Steve Jobs used to say that if he had asked people what they wanted, nobody would have answered, because people often don't know what they want unless you give that something to them. And the iPhone was a revolution. Do you have a smartphone in your hands? Do you have a smartphone? So maybe as more than one smartphones. You all spend the majority of your time on the phone. Can anybody leave the phone in the house and then go for a walk? Well, the phone call, smartphone or whatever you want to call it, is a transformative element in a communication game between brands, customers, brand and citizens, brand and whatever you want to add. The world, for many, is completely opposite, upside down. So there is no transformation, there is no progress. What's sure is that the bad guys are less than the generous people who are engaged, empathetic. Yet, the few bad guys make a lot of noise because we are quiet. And so communicating means also to fight against the noise of the bad guys and to highlight the good things, the actions their family carry out all over the world. So in this upside world, what we are doing is setting ourselves in the gut of the world to understand what we don't like, what we like, or maybe we like everything. Maybe there are some things that we want to improve. The only way to improve things is to do the things so that what we don't like can change. It sounds trivial, but that's the truth. And I know you do it better than me every day. But the power that the brand is that it puts together a lot of people, because it is the reflection of common values, of a purpose, of the goal, and of this vision, which contributes to make our vision clear. What's the first thing that the most people do that have access to the internet as soon as they wake up?
Tú el WhatsApp, por ejemplo. Ella el WhatsApp, lo primero.
You use WhatsApp. So she says she starts to write on WhatsApp. Who among you wakes up with the alarm clock on the phone? Or if you wake up after the sound of the alarm clock, you turn on the phone. Who uses WhatsApp as the first thing, or the internet, or X, Twitter, emails, or Instagram stories?
En esta realidad que hace
So, we are in this reality
después de que nos despertamos,
which,
casi todos los usuarios de smartphones,
in which for the first 15 minutes after we wake up, almost all users having a cell phone go and check their phone. So this means that what do our users do? Where are our users?
Ahora bien, si yo me levanto a la mañana,
how many of us reach our users through this device? So if I wake up in the morning and what I receive is a boring message or a cold, irrelevant message, what do? I ignore that message.
y me despierta,
On the contrary, if your message is attractive and wakes you up and makes me connect with you, then I listen to you, I get in touch with you. So the content we share is the key element to establish this bridge, this relation with the community, my family, my relatives, my friends. And it is also true that we are entering the time of AI, in which shortly AI will generate so many lies than the most important thing will not be the content, but the source, those who shared the content. And so your credibility will have a stronger power because we need to recover trust in a context in which trust will probably be destroyed and kicked out of the window. So in this new world where we are entering or which we are adjusting to, which we are embracing or trying to encode, so what we cannot do in this world is to realize that there are new needs, and these new needs are not caused only by technology, but also by social, cultural, emotional changes
de nuestra sociedad. No es solamente
of our
la
society.
migración, que también hay muchos otros asuntos.
It's not only a matter of migration, there are many other topics which are disrupting the basis, the foundations of our society.
De hecho, hay muchos cambios.
And not necessarily all changes are good. There are some changes which are not good, but we cannot ignore them and look somewhere else because they are part of the global conversation, of the global dialogue. So if we don't adjust to the change, if we don't generate it, well, this entails an action, a courage that takes us out of our comfort zone, makes us go beyond what we are used to.
Y por lo tanto, es importante que cada uno sea consciente.
So this is why it is important for us to be aware that all of us contribute to generating
La palabra que les dejo a la hora
and sharing and designing our future. When we have to talk about present future and present and future communication, we need to think of brand of on, which is made up of three words: brand plus off plus on. Off means our analogical space, on means the digital space, in the internet, the apps, the social networks, and everything that is digital.
No, que estuvo bien porque yo estaba yendo muy rápido y las chicas me pidieron que vaya más despacio. Thank you. Gracias, chicas.
Am I good at speed? Yes, so thanks to the interpreters, just a short break to allow them to breathe and drink. We in Argentina talk very fast, but I'm trying now to be less fast so that the interpreters have the chance to follow me. So what happened on the 13th of March 2013?
Francisco. Sí, ni más ni menos.
After more than 2,000 years, yes, Pope Francis, the first known European Pope.
Cuando desde un punto de vista de un analista, de un experto en branding.
So, from the point of view of an expert, of a brand expert, we need to wonder, why did he choose the name Francis? So what is his message, his value proposition? So we understand that everything contributes to creating a message. Everything communicates, and the perception of people determines the reality of a brand. Do you remember what he answered, why he chose the name Francis? You probably remember that better than I do. But on the 13th of March 2013, brand of On became a real world within the Vatican. Because how is a new pope announced? This way. So once you see the white smoke, you see somebody at a window saying, Habemus Papam. Habemus Papam Franciscus. So on the 13th of March 2013, for the first time in history, I repeat, Habemus Papam happened not only in St. Peter's Square, but also on Twitter. I don't know if you can see it in the room, but Habemus Papam Franciscum was written on Twitter, which was not obvious into 2013. So somebody in the Vatican said we need to get into the new era and we need to use social media. So all debates, all discussions happened. So what should we do? Should we write on Twitter the election of the new Pope? So let's figure out what their faces might have been. But this decision was a brave one. This was the right decision. So some weeks after his election, the director of the social media manager of the Vatican was interviewed by the Times. The interview is still on the web. He was asked something that we have just said over the last 2 days. Why is the Vatican now on social media? And here was the answer. Where are the people? Where are our people? Where is our audience? Where are young people? And what happens if we are not there where they are? At the same time, the interesting thing is that social networks, internet, the apps, and new technologies allowed for this huge world to transform itself into something very small, into something tiny. This is true. So very often this depends on what we think of it. But we have transformed our world into a small town, into a square, and at the same time, we have seen a change, a disruptive change that happened so naturally that we could not even notice it. When we elected Pope Francis, or when Pope Francis was elected, then have a look at St. Peter's Square. This is just a picture. Here we had an early adopter, a small cell phone, but have a look at the people there. There are no smartphones, so they cannot be seen. What happened 8 years later on the occasion of Pope Francis? Let's have a look at the square. You see all of these smartphones, tablets, iPhones. Everybody was sharing the event with the world. What is the best picture? The one above, the one below, it depends. It depends on a communitarian point of view, on a family point of view, on an institutional point of view. So the fact that we allowed our community to be connected, is this positive or negative, in your opinion? Well, so let's never forget that technology is nor good or bad, it's just neutral. So what is positive or negative is what we do with technology, because if we are really disconnected, if we are always disconnected from life, always looking at our telephone, we have the responsibility for it. But when communication acquires power, becomes powerful, and when messages become part of our higher wisdom, then you can see here the pictures of March 2013. Then what we experience is a paradigm change. So the Pope on Twitter today has more inhabitants than Colombia, than Argentina, and other countries. More than 50 million followers on X, which is today's Twitter. So the Pope has the chance to reach millions of people through one single click. So communication is not just in the hands of the big tech companies such as Google or others, but the tools that are today used are very powerful for all of them who know the goals of their use. So what we are now testifying to is a change, and the protagonist of this new era is you. are you. So what you will do over the next few months will be part of a heritage that you will be building. And all of this is fundamental. These meetings are fundamental to share views, opinions, to discuss. And what we generate is knowledge that becomes valuable when we meet. So these 7 days is not just something unimportant for the future. It will be like a springboard for the next few months. So let's think of what would have happened during the pandemic if we had not had the technology. So what could have happened during the COVID pandemic if we hadn't had the technologies to think, to talk with our spiritual leaders, to participate in the Mass? So what would happen if we ignored the opportunities that this change, societal change is now doing? So if young people understand about technology more than we do, because they were born with technologies at their fingertips, so they are digital natives, as they are named by many people. And we can learn really a lot from young people. We can listen to them, we can speak their language, we can become relevant on their eyes. So young people consume in a different way as we do, they share in a different way that we do, and they see the world in a different way. They don't see a better world, they do not see a worse world, they just see differently from how we see the world. So it's not by chance that we talked about Generation Z or Alpha, because it's interesting to understand how we can build value by understanding and creating connections with them. Paradigm changes are very powerful for many countries, for example China, so that there are no fights between people when people just walk on the streets. There are some streets dedicated to those using smartphones and the streets for those who do not use them. So let's figure out the number of people that are walking on the streets with smartphones, so they could just not see what is happening. And many traffic lights are now on a higher level because pedestrians keep watching their telephones. So in order to avoid any incidents or accidents, the traffic lights should be placed, so were placed like on a so above, on a higher level. This is good in order to create connections with people. According to some studies that were carried out, those owning a smartphone never get rid of their smartphones in any time of the day. So is your smartphone 1 meter away from you or less? Because smartphone is used like an extension of one's body. It's like a sixth sense device. So we can criticize from the societal point of view the fact that the telephone keeps us away from the Hink at Nunc, that keeps us away from our family and friends, but the fact that we can interact every time with our followers is a big opportunity. For example, my mother had some hearing problems and hearing issues, so she could not interact socially and people were not patient to her. But when she got a technological tool, now she got the chance also to interact with people. So this sixth sense cannot be ignored when we need to build, when we need to communicate. So let's moving back to the human being. Do you know this pyramid about the basic human needs? So this is just a joke. This is nothing serious. But the basic human needs are smartphone batteries and Wi-Fi and the telephone. So the society we are now building, or that we have built, is not good. It's not good or bad. It's just a new society. And like anything new, we should just become friends to what is new, and we need to enhance it, to give value to it. So the economic change is promoted by technologies. Technology can be a big bubble, but technology at the same time pushes into the direction of a change, so that it is used in our job, in our life, so that we can see this technology as a part and parcel of our family life. Is it an easy transition? No, it is not, because if it were, any person would consider this transition difficult, because we have the chance and we believe we can contribute to that digital transition to become more human. So this is a transition that we are now following with patience. And of course, if we do not make mistakes, we cannot learn. So we are also growing, we are developing ourselves, we are evolving, because the territory, the land we are going to, is a no man's land. So when we make mistakes, we learn something new. And at the same time, it is fascinating to know that there are 8 billion people on the planet Earth, but only 100 years ago, there were only 2 billion people. So the Earth population has become 4 times more numerous than 100 years ago, with more opportunities and challenges ahead. So this context has to do with digital transformation. We talked about people owning a smartphone are just 5.61 million people, 70% of the world population. 30% of the world population has no smartphone. Could you think of it? Could you figure it out? Did you understand this data? But it's not something that is now worrying me, because 66% of the world population is using internet. 44% of the population does not use the internet. It's just a matter of time, infrastructures, and financings. Plus 5 million people use the internet. How many of them are active on social networks? All of those who surf the internet are also on social media. Is that possible not to be there on social media? Please tell me. This year, the average user of internet, do you know how much time do they spend connected to the web? More or less, just tell me more or less. 5 hours, 8 hours, 6 hours, 5 hours, 3 hours? On average, 6 hours plus 40 minutes a day are spent online. This means that there are people like me that spend 10 hours a day in front of the screen of a smartphone, and also plus the hours at the computer. This is incredible, because allowing people to interact between themselves without looking at the screen is really difficult. So the country that use social network are Kenya, South Africa, the Philippines, etc. So these are the top countries: Kenya, South Africa, Brazil, and the Philippines. These countries do not have the highest number of inhabitants, but they have the highest rate of people spending most hours on social media. So they have the way to transform this data into actions and strategy. But now I'll come to the conclusions. Please do not fall asleep because I'm almost at the end of my presentation, so we can be optimistic or we can be also pessimistic in front of a change. The optimist will always find a way, an opportunity with a problem, and the pessimist will find a problem for each opportunity. So, are there optimists here? Raise your hands. Those who didn't raise your hand are pessimists. Can you raise your hand, pessimist? And those who haven't voted, are they nor pessimists or optimists? One lesson to remember: tools are just a means to an end. They are not the end in itself. So everything happening on the digital context is focused on people. So what is important to understand right now and when we communicate is people. People are the most important thing. We should not reason in terms of numbers, but we need to reason in terms of Carlo or Maria or Ernesto or Jose or Helena. We need to give a name to people who do not want to be considered as algorithms, or they want to be just considered as people, and especially these people know what they want. They want to be listened to. Communication, if it is only unidirectional, monodirectional, fails. This is inevitable. But when communication allows us to discuss, to listen to people, then it will be successful. People want to be listened to. They want to be heard. We live in a time where solitude, where loneliness is just a silent disease, a silent disorder. Listening to people is part of a mitigation strategy to loneliness. And we will be talking tomorrow about brands in a more specific way, but I would like to give you with some words and ideas that we talk about tomorrow. Logo is not a brand. Logo is just a part of a brand. The brand is much more than a logo, and we will explore the topic into more detail. When we are talking about brand, we are not just talking about marketing or advertising. When we are talking about brand, we are talking about many other points, connection points between us and our families, because the brand has to do with the goal that we are setting, or our values, our identity, our people, our vision. The principles we are defined by, and the principles that lead us to do what we do. So when we are talking about brands, I always ask you to consider 5 different questions. These are 5 questions. If you have an answer to all of them, it means that you're following the right direction. But if you need to think for long to an answer, then it means that your brand needs a check. And it means, and what are your goals? First question: what are your values? What are your passions? Why is what you want to say relevant? These are just some of the questions you should ask. What is a brand? I think there are many definitions. The best one is what people feel, think, and share about your product, service, institution, etc. It has to do with something immaterial, intangible, with the emotional connection that goes well beyond what we call as top of mind in English. So in order to reach the top of heart and not just the top of mind, we need to build a good brand. This is the reason why what is important is to review and to update and to confirm that our brand is a brand we are willing to show, we are passionate about, something that we want, because a well-known brand generates some behaviors. Or sometimes, if it is not wanted by us, it generates only challenges. So, within the field of communication, do you know how many branding impacts do we receive in a city like Madrid or Buenos Aires or Monterrey or Rome? Do you have an idea? More than 4,000.
Depende la fuente, te va a decir entre 7.000.
It depends on the source.
¿Cuántos?
Between 7,000 and 10,000. And do you know how many of these impacts remain in our unconscious mind? How many of those pictures that we keep seeing remain? 0.4% are kept in our mind. Thousands and thousands of euro, of dollars spent for building brands just thrown away because there is no connection between brands and people. These brands are not relevant to people's life. People just recognize them, but they are not stuck in their mind. Communication is in many cases noise, so it is not relevant. Communication becomes passionating when it becomes difficult, and the best way to learn how to communicate is by communicating. Simply as that, because that's the only way to learn how to communicate, fine-tuning one's tone of voice, fine-tuning our message, tone. And this is not something that we can just learn with an Excel file, but we can learn it only through real life. We are talking about history, we are talking about communication. So my question for you is as follows. What is the story you would like to inspire with? What is the story you would like to build? Not the story you have just built, but how would you like to involve all people in building this new passionating story, this new chapter? This new chapter of a passionating story we are called upon to live. This night, tonight, in Italy or in other countries or in Spain, 9 brands out of 10 might disappear. 80% of our time is spent by interacting with brands that were not there before 1980. 1 over 10 brands is relevant, is wanted, and this brand understood that the digital transformation has nothing to do with technology, but it has to do with people, and it understood that marketing is not technology-based, but it is people-based. So you understood a very important matter. Do you know how a chicken makes eggs? Do you know what is its sound? This is a chicken actually. What is the chicken sound? The hen sound. One friend of ours is now making an effort to do that. A hen does like caw, 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 caw. Why? Because we were told we need to compete in order to be transcendent. But to do that, we need to create, collaborate, we need to build, we need to collaborate more among us and among the others, among the world, in the world. because beyond competing with others, co-creating, collaboration, construction, and cooperation generate much more value, which is winning over everything. Some years ago, the mantra was "Morts tua vita mea." Now, alone, nobody can save themselves. So, in conclusion, the big question is a brand existing without people? A brand is people. People are not just brand ambassadors. They are the brand. We are the brand. This is why understanding the new world, starting with a human transformation, will allow us to evolve. And to shift from looking for likes to looking for love. Because we need being loved, we need to love. This seems to be something very trivial, but love is never mentioned. It's very undervalued, love, in our societies, but love will allow us to evolve. An evolution that has happened already in some years, but not in all fields. This is what the telephone was all about in the past, and how it is today, and the same is true. What was a car like some years ago, and what is a car like now? And the same question is true for schools, for classes. Everything has changed. But most of the things that are essential have not changed, because when we think of the changes that have happened, we also need to learn the abilities and skills that will allow us to transform our headache due to changing paradigms into opportunities, never seen opportunities. And it is important for young people to know that they are not alone, that there is no uncertainty, and that love is more powerful, that we will help you have wings to fly. Because the most interesting thing is that when a person sees a bird on a tree branch, that bird does not rely on the branch or on the tree, but they trust their wings to fly, to love, to believe. Wings to trust others, or to trust. In this world, something will be better, will be worse, but giving up is no choice, is no option. The bravest people, those who move forward, those who favor change, are those who win, because the normal that we were used to is no normal anymore. There are many normals. There are many futures. The normal is just an illusion, because what is true for a spider can be a chaos for a mosquito. So understanding a change from our point of view is something that is interesting also to our family, which allows us to share our strength with patience, courage, and love. We can reach all of those goals that might seem very far away today, but which undoubtedly over time they will be at hand. So that we need to believe in change. We will talk about more of that tomorrow. We have no time for questions, but thank you so much. Thanks, Andy, for your presentation, which was absolutely interesting. Thanks for your time. Andy will be with us tomorrow morning. Now we'll have a short break, and then we'll meet again at 6:30 for the Mass in the church. Thanks a lot. See you tomorrow morning. Thank you.